I grew up in a house where laughter always had a sharp edge. It was never the kind that felt warm. It made your skin crawl, like someone scratching a wooden door at midnight. That laughter came when I slipped on a wet floor no one warned me about, when I mispronounced an English word in class, when I asked for new shoes because the soles of my old ones had split wide open. My dad, Daryl, was the kind of man who didn't need to shout to scare people. One look from him would make my shoulders tense up on reflex. He was a veteran, served in the desert, and brought home more than stories. A hunting rifle mounted on the wall, the habit of waking up at 4:30 a.m., and a simmering rage that could explode if dinner didn't taste right. My brother Mason, 4 years older than me, was a copy of Dad, except he smiled while hurting people. Once, he snuck nail polish into my shampoo bottle. When my hair turned bright red, he laughed so hard he nearly choked on his orange juice. Dad just shook his head and said, "You brought that on yourself." My mom, Ellen, was the only one in the house who didn't slam her fist on the table when speaking, but she also didn't reach for me when I needed lifting. Every time I got yelled at, she stayed silent, head down, fingers twisted together like she was punishing herself. Whenever I looked to her for comfort, she only whispered, "You have to try harder. Don't make your father angry." It always felt like a prayer said to the wrong God. When I was 14, Mason won the district football championship. Dad threw a backyard barbecue and invited the entire neighborhood. There were burgers, cold beer, black and gold balloons hanging limp from the fence. I stood quietly in the kitchen slicing potatoes, wearing the apron Mom handed me, sweat soaking the back of my shirt. Dad walked in, looked at me and muttered, "Not everyone's born to win. Some are just made to serve." My name is Joshua. And at that time, I had just turned 16. I can't remember the last time someone said my name without sarcasm or a command attached. In our house, I wasn't a son. I was the janitor, the doorman, the practice target. Some nights, I lay on the floor of the storage room, holding the stray cat I secretly kept, tears soaking the old frayed blanket beneath me. I used to dream about running away, grabbing my torn backpack, walking toward the freeway, searching for a place I could finally call home. But then I'd hear Dad's voice again. "Who out there would ever want a useless piece of trash like you?" That sentence clung to me like a shadow etched into every cell. Every time I thought about speaking up, Mason would get in my face, sneering, "Come on, Joshua. You're not worth trusting." I used to wish I was born into a normal family, where a kid could fall without being mocked, where dinner meant gathering, not discipline. But I stopped wishing. Dreams, like seedlings in dry soil, wither without water. One June morning, while cleaning the garage windows, I heard Dad say to Mason, "Got plans for him this summer. Let's see how he handles it." They both laughed. I stood there, knuckles tight around the rag, heart pounding. I didn't know the details, but I had a clear feeling. The summer I turned 17 would change everything. Either I'd collapse, or I'd learn how to save myself. And I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I stepped into that house as someone's child. That morning, we crossed the Utah border into Colorado's Red Plateau. I sat silently in the back row, my head against the sun-heated window. Mason and Dad were chatting loudly about Auburn's upcoming football game, while Mom fixated on the GPS like the SUV might vanish into the desert if she blinked. I asked if we could stop for a break. Dad glanced at me in the rearview mirror, that familiar flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Fine," he muttered, then told Mason, "Pull into that old rest stop up ahead. Barely anyone goes there. Make it quick." Barely anyone was an understatement. It was a run-down gas station with detached bathrooms, a couple of vending machines on the side, and an open sign flapping in the wind like even it had given up. Surrounding us were dust, dry brush, and old tire marks pressed into the dirt. I stepped out, t-shirt clinging to my sweaty back. My phone was charging in the car, no wallet either. I didn't think I'd need it. I headed toward the bathroom, wiping sweat off my brow, ignoring Mason's chuckle behind me. Bet he thinks he's in some post-apocalyptic movie. Less than 10 minutes later, I stepped out and froze. The parking lot was empty. No engine sounds. No trace of our old gray Ford Expedition. No one. At first, I thought it was a prank. Maybe they were hiding nearby, waiting to jump out and laugh. I walked around the rest stop. Nothing. Just the stench of melting asphalt and sun-scorched silence. I sat on the concrete step and waited. An hour, then two. A truck pulled in for gas. The driver, a middle-aged man with a snake tattoo wrapped around his arm, asked if I was okay. I smiled and lied, waiting for my folks. They probably took a wrong turn. After his truck disappeared into the horizon, it was just me and the silence. A gust of wind swept past, carrying dust and a crushing shame that lodged itself in my chest. I began to understand they weren't coming back. Dad's old words echoed like dull blades. Useless kids only cause trouble. I'd rather pay a fine than take you with me. Mason's voice, sharper. Let's see how long Joshua lasts without help. I walked around looking for cell signal. Nothing. Not a single bar. The vending machine flashed insert coins, mocking me. I didn't have a cent. My legs weakened, throat dry. I slumped against the hot concrete wall. The sun wasn't the worst part. The severed bond, that was what burned. I could have cried, but it wouldn't change anything. I was 17, no longer a boy waiting to be rescued. They didn't get lost, they left me, deliberately, with planning and mutual consent. A car approached. I stood up, an old minivan. A woman in her 30s, with blonde hair tied up, was helping two kids out of the back seat. I walked toward her, heart tangled between hope and dread. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to sound calm. "My phone and wallet are in the car. I need to make a call." She hesitated, eyes flicking from me to her kids, measuring risk. I stood tall, looked her in the eye, kept my hands visible. After a pause, she handed me her iPhone. I didn't call my dad, didn't call my mom, didn't call Mason. I dialed 411 directory assistance. When it connected, I asked for the nearest shelter, Grand Junction, nearly 60 miles away. I gave the phone back and said softly, "My family had an emergency. They left early. Someone's coming to get me later, but I need to get into town. Could you give me a ride?" Silence. 1 second. Then she nodded. In the van, I sat between two kids munching on crackers, soft children's music playing overhead. Through the window, red mountains rose in the distance. Deep inside, something shifted. Not pain, something emptier, yet steady. I didn't know where I'd start, how I'd survive, or where I'd sleep, but I knew this. I wouldn't call home. I wouldn't beg them back. I wouldn't offer an explanation. If this was their test, they were going to wait a long time for an answer. The ride took nearly 2 hours. I didn't talk much. The woman's name was Carla. She was an accountant in Fruta. She only asked 3 things. Need water, hungry, anyone we can call for you. I answered no to all 3. Carla dropped me off at the downtown post office, right at Main Street and 3rd. She slipped a folded paper into my hand with an address on it. "Someone named Rosie runs the place. Tell her Carla sent you." I nodded, thanked her, trying not to let my eyes water. Carla wasn't my mother, but in that brief moment, she felt like a kind of family I'd never known. I walked 7 blocks through sparsely populated streets as evening settled in, the pale yellow streetlights flickering at my feet. The shelter was a small red brick building with a slightly crooked sign above the main door that read Community Resource Center. I knocked twice. A short, round black woman in a plaid shirt cracked the door open, her eyes cautious. "My name is Joshua. Carla, the accountant from Fruta, told me to come here." Her eyes immediately softened. She opened the door wider. "Come in. You look worn out." Rosie led me down a narrow hallway where a few men sat quietly on folding chairs, eyes fixed on the floor. She brought me to a small room with 2 bunk beds and a metal cabinet. She handed me a towel, a toothbrush, and a set of old but clean clothes, then said, "Take a shower. You'll make it in time for dinner." That first night, I lay staring at a ceiling stained with old watermarks, my heart thudding, not out of fear, but because I no longer knew who I was. Part of me was still the boy left behind in Colorado. The other part was just a blank space with no name yet. The next morning, I had peanut butter on toast with black coffee, the first breakfast I'd ever had without yelling in the background. Rosie gave me a list of places hiring for short-term work. I chose the last one. Diner needs dishwasher, no experience required. The place was called The Nest, 3 blocks from the center of town. I arrived at 10 a.m. A bald, slightly hunched old man of Mexican descent stood behind the counter in an apron. I told the truth, no sugarcoating. I don't have papers, no diploma, but I can work. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Wash dishes, don't complain, don't be late. That's it. I'm Victor. You start today." I nodded. No other words were needed. The Nest wasn't big, 10 tables, a long counter, and a kitchen that felt like an oven in the summer. I scrubbed dishes until my hands went numb, the cold water splitting my nails, grease clinging to my hair no matter how many times I rinsed. I didn't complain, didn't wait for praise. I knew. This was the first step. A week later, I used my first earnings, $80, to buy a used phone from a pawn shop. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I went online, searched how to replace personal documents, applied for a new social security number, and read each instruction like I was learning to read for the first time. Rosie let me use her computer at night. I created a new email account. The old name no longer existed. The punchline in A Twisted Family needed a new version, stronger, sharper, and most importantly, no longer afraid. On the 10th night, while folding towels, I got a call from an unknown number. My heart tightened. I picked up. My mother's voice came through, hoarse and anxious. "Where are you? Are you okay? We thought you just went to the restroom." I didn't respond immediately. The silence dragged on until I heard my father's voice in the background. "Told you, he's just being difficult. He loves causing trouble." I moved the phone away from my ear, hung up, and blocked the number. No hesitation, no trembling, just a firm closing of a door I had once knocked on until my knuckles bled. The next morning, Victor asked, "Swollen eyes from no sleep?" I simply replied, "Just closed a door." He nodded, didn't ask further. In the sunlight filtering through the cloudy window pane, I saw my reflection in the oven door. Messy hair, red eyes, sweat-soaked shirt. But the look in my eyes had changed. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. I wouldn't call them again. I wouldn't find excuses for what they did. That call from my mother wasn't the last. Just a few days later, during my break, my old phone buzzed again. Unknown caller lit up the screen. I stood in the walk-in cooler, holding a bunch of cilantro, heart pounding like I was 10 years old again, waiting for my father's rage. I didn't want to answer, but I did. "Joshua? It's Mom." Her voice shaky. "We just wanted to teach you a lesson, just a little joke. Dad said to wait for you, but when we came back, you were gone." There was a long pause. Then Dad's voice, far off. "Where the hell could he go? Call him back. Tell him to get home now." I calmly pulled the phone away, ended the call, blocked the number. I didn't shake. I didn't hurt. It just felt like finally closing a door I'd been left pounding on for years. That night, I stepped out of the shelter with a small bag slung over my shoulder. Rosie walked me to the doorstep, handed me a food container and a slip of paper. "First month free. A friend of mine has a room above her laundromat." The room was so small I could nearly touch both walls with outstretched arms. The ceiling was stained from old leaks, and the only window overlooked a parking lot full of delivery trucks. But it was mine. No shouting, no disdainful glares. I laid out a thin blanket over the old mattress, sat on the wooden floor, and exhaled. For the first time in my life, I heard my own breath. Clear, steady, and mine. Victor, the owner of the Nest, asked if I wanted more hours. I agreed immediately. From dishwashing, I moved up to helping in the kitchen. A month later, I could boil eggs without cracks, fry potatoes without burning them, and make the roast beef sandwich our Thursday regulars always ordered. I still didn't have complete documentation, but Rosie connected me with a nonprofit that helped youth from abusive homes. They walked me through forms, filed paperwork to my old state to retrieve my birth certificate. It took time, but I was patient. I had waited 17 years to be myself. A few more months meant nothing. 3 weeks after moving out, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I heard you're living in Grand Junction, Mason's voice came through, bold and smug. All right, Josh, enough with the drama. You're making mom and dad freak out. Stop being such a damn girl. I didn't answer. He kept going. We were coming back for you that day. You ran off. You caused this yourself. Same crap you pulled in 10th grade, telling the teacher I hit you. I looked out the small window in my apartment where the streetlights were starting to flicker in the dusk. Then I said evenly, I'm not coming back. Mason scoffed. Who do you think you are, surviving on your own? I'm already surviving. I hung up. This time, I didn't block the number. I wanted them to try again. Only to be met with silence. The next morning, I swapped my SIM card, a new number, an empty contact list. It felt like unplugging from a wall that once imprisoned me. Fall came. Victor took me out behind the diner, pointed at the brick patio. You want to learn pastry work? He asked, raising an eyebrow. My baker quit. You in? I nodded, so I moved from greasy pans to flour, eggs, and sugar. I learned how to knead dough, watch oven temps by the degree, dust powdered sugar like a sculptor with a chisel. The hands that used to shield my face now crafted something sweet. After 3 months, I had a small stash of savings, enough to buy a used laptop at the flea market, not for games. I enrolled in a basic accounting class at the community center. I still didn't make friends, not yet, but I smiled now when regulars said my name right. I carried a key in my pocket, my key, to a room I could finally call home. One time, Victor said, I knew you wouldn't go back. I asked, how could you be sure? He looked at me with half a grin, half a challenge. Some kids, once they step out of the dark, they don't turn around. I started every morning at 6 a.m. to the screech of a budget phone alarm perched on a shelf. No one woke me. No one called out. No one waited at the table. Just the chill of air through the cracked window and the hiss of an old radiator reminding me, no one lives this life for me. After my morning shift at the Nest, I'd head back to my tiny apartment, fire up my laptop, and log into my basic business management class at Mesa Community College. At first, the numbers, terms, and balance sheets made my head spin. I used to think I wasn't smart enough, something my father never failed to remind me of whenever my math grades came in lower than Mason's. But I stuck with it. I printed every handout at the library, underlined each definition with a red pen, studied late into the night under a dim desk lamp. I learned as I worked, tracking simple operations at the diner, calculating inventory levels, noting customer habits, and tallying weekly profits. Victor noticed. One evening, he walked past the kitchen and saw me counting the remaining bags of flour, scribbling notes neatly into an old notebook. No one told you to do that, he said. I replied, I just want to understand how everything runs. I figured I should know. He stared at me for a second, said nothing, then placed a ring of keys on the counter. I take Mondays off. Starting next week, you close the place. That was the first time I ever held keys to something that belonged to me, even if only once a week. But to me, it meant trust. It was a beginning. Things slowly settled into place. A year later, I was no longer the quiet dishwasher tucked away at the back. I stood at the counter, greeting customers, checking inventory, handling catering orders. Victor, a year older and slower, handed me most of the daily management. But not everything came easy. There were nights I sat in my room, clutching textbooks with tears streaming down from exhaustion and loneliness. Sometimes I felt like a ghost. No friends, no family, no one asking if I was okay. I tried messaging a few classmates from my online courses, but their replies were polite and distant. On cold winter nights, when wind howled through the window cracks and the radiator couldn't keep up, I found myself missing a real family dinner, even if I'd never had one. I missed being waited on. I missed belonging. Once, I saw Mason post a photo on Facebook standing next to a new truck, grinning, with the caption, "Owning my destiny." I didn't know how much of it was true, but it no longer made me bitter. I had come too far to turn around. I began rewriting my life one work hour at a time, one assignment grade at a time, one customer compliment about the corn chowder I had created from scratch. One Friday afternoon, Victor called me upstairs, where he lived with his wife, Linda. They invited me to stay for dinner. In the center of the table was a steaming tray of lasagna. As he poured water, Victor said, "I'm thinking of opening a small branch over in Fruta. If you're up for it, I want you to manage it." I nearly dropped the glass. Linda smiled kindly. "Victor says, you're not just capable, you're better at it than he ever was." I bit my lower lip to steady my voice. "I've never done anything that big before." Victor smirked. "My first was a sandwich shop in the middle of nowhere, tin roof, leaking, 3 customers total. The important part is starting." That night, I went home and stared at the ceiling like I often did. But this time, I was thinking. I wasn't the kid left behind on the side of the road anymore. I was a man facing his own choices. That little diner in Fruta wasn't a dream city, but to me, it was a whole new world I'd built by hand. The next morning, I returned to the nest, stepped into the kitchen, and looked at each wall crack like they were markers of a journey. I pulled my apron off the hook, tied it tight, and started the day with a mindset I'd never known before. I had once been left behind, but that no longer defined me. I was living on my own terms. I met Kendra on a rainy, late autumn afternoon, just 2 weeks after the Fruta location opened. She walked in soaked, no umbrella, hair in a messy bun, clutching a thick medical textbook like a shield. She sat near the window, ordered red bean soup and black coffee, no sugar. I served her meal. Kendra didn't look at me when she ordered, her tone clipped like she was racing against time. But when I returned with a steaming bowl and a full mug, she glanced up, eyes dark and surprised. "You put the spoon on the left. Most people don't notice that." I smiled, a little awkward. "I'm left-handed. I figured you might be too." She nodded, lips pressed tight, a faint smile sneaking through. That day, we didn't say much else. But she came back the next week. Then again the week after. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she sat at table 3 near the window. Always ordered the same thing, unless she had a big test. Then she added a slice of banana bread. I started a small game. Each time she came, I wrote her name wrong on the receipt. Kendra, Kendre, Kenra. She caught it every time, pretended to be annoyed, then laughed. That's how we started. No drama, no sparks, just 2 strangers finding something familiar in a routine. Our first date wasn't supposed to be a date. Her study group canceled last minute, and she'd already booked a table at a popular pizza place in downtown Grand Junction. I was wiping tables when she approached and asked, "Have you eaten? Please don't say ramen." I didn't say no. That night we sat across from each other, surrounded by noise and the scent of melting cheese, sharing tiny stories. She was scared of raw fish. I was allergic to strawberries. She once dreamed of being a painter before choosing medicine. I just dreamed of hearing my name without sarcasm. After that night, we started seeing each other more often. I waited for her after dissection lab. She sat through my kitchen failures at the nest. When winter passed, we moved in together. A modest 2-bedroom near Canyon View Park. When Kendrick came into my life, things started shifting. Not with grand promises, but quiet presence. She didn't ask much about my family, but she noticed when I flinched at unknown calls or stared a little too long at customer family photos. A year later, I proposed with a simple silver ring hidden in a box of cream puffs, her favorite. She laughed so hard she almost dropped it, then nodded yes, eyes wet. We married in a small ceremony at a state park. Doug, my rock music-obsessed downstairs neighbor, was my best man. Victor baked the lemon wedding cake, topped with 2 crossed silver spoons. Linda hugged me before the vows and whispered, "This is the perfect ending to a wild beginning." The next year, Ellie was born, a curly-haired girl with Kendra's dark eyes and my scowl. 2 years later came Marcus, with a scream like a fire alarm and a grip that clung to my shirt every night. I wasn't a perfect dad. I fumbled diapers, played metal music instead of lullabies, but in each moment, I learned how to love without fearing abandonment. I stopped wishing for a different family. I was living in the one I'd chosen, the one I'd built. Some nights, when Kendra rested her head on my shoulder and the kids giggled on the carpet, I'd wonder, if they hadn't left me in Colorado, would I ever have found my way here? I don't know. And maybe I don't need to. Because now, every laugh in this little house carries no sting. It's the sound of freedom, proof that I didn't just survive, I learned how to live. I didn't look for them, at least not for the first few years. But one night, when Ellie had turned 3 and Marcus just learned to say daddy without a lisp, I lay on the living room couch, phone in hand, and my thumb hovered over Create New Account. Under the name Leo Grant, I started watching my old family again, quietly, like a shadow they once cast out. I found Mason first. He was still showing off selfies with rented cars, gym photos with captions like fighting every day, but as I scrolled down, I saw a post from 7 months ago, set to friends only. Sometimes it feels like the whole world turns its back on you, but I'm still here. Below it was a single comment from an old friend. You okay? Heard that situation was a mess. I dug a little deeper. Mason had opened a high-tech car wash using money from a youth entrepreneur support program. But within 6 months, it got fined for using unauthorized chemicals that contaminated the neighborhood's groundwater. That led to 3 minor lawsuits and an unpaid tax bill. No one went to jail, but the business door slammed shut. I moved on to my mom, Lorraine. Her Facebook page looked like a warped museum of the past, old beach photos of the whole family from when I was 6, long posts about cherished children, and shares about forgiveness and togetherness. I read it all without feeling a thing. Not anger, not sadness, just the strange sensation of watching a stranger wear a familiar face in a poorly written play. My dad, Daryl, had no online presence anymore. But from one of Lorraine's posts, I learned he had sold the old electronics shop where I had worked every summer in 8th grade because he couldn't compete with the chain store across the highway. That post got 3 likes and no comments. In a photo, she posted with the caption, "Everything changes, but a mother's heart stays the same." He stood in the background, frail, hair graying, face stripped of anything that once made me afraid. They didn't try to find me through social media, but I knew they were searching. An old high school friend named Derek, who used to be close with Mason, suddenly sent a friend request to Leo Grant. Another profile, no picture, messaged me. "You're Joshua, right? Your parents are looking for you." I didn't reply. I didn't need confirmation. I already knew why they were looking. At the time, my Fruita location of The Nest had just won a small award from the local business association, Sustainable Growth Business. The article in the local paper had a photo of me smiling in front of the kitchen, my hand resting on Marcus's shoulder. Kendra sent the article link to her mom, who shared it on social media. Maybe someone nearby saw it and reconnected the frayed threads of the past. I kept watching, this time through local community groups. I saw Lorraine post asking for donations to help buy arthritis medication, ending the message with, "We're struggling, but I believe God never abandons his children." That same day, Mason reposted her plea, adding the caption, "Family is everything. If you still have your parents, cherish them." They never mentioned me, not one line, but every word hinted at a void, a person they couldn't call because they once threw him away. When I told Kendra, she wasn't surprised. She peeled an apple without looking up and asked, "Do you want to see them again?" I shook my head. Not out of hate, it's just, you know how some people show up in your life just to teach you a lesson, not to walk the whole road with you? She smiled and handed the apple slices to Ellie. "You're writing a new chapter. Don't let them hold the pen." I nodded. But that night, after the kids were asleep, I reopened Mason's profile. There was a new post, a black and white photo of my father in a wheelchair, sitting in front of their house. The caption underneath read simply, "If anyone knows how to reach Josh, please let him know. It's important." For the first time in years, I looked longer than a few seconds. I thought about the life I had now. The little family sleeping peacefully in a 2-bedroom house with a garden out back. I thought about the man who once called me a burden. Then I turned off the screen, plugged in my phone, and returned to the present. Where I am Joshua, a husband, a father, a business owner, and the only person who gets to decide who enters my life. One thing I know for certain, if they were looking for me out of love, they would have come a long time ago. But if it's about money, they're far too late. I was checking the supplier order when Maya, the server at the Fruita location of The Nest, walked briskly into the kitchen, voice low but alert. Joshua, there's a family asking for you at the front. No reservation. I looked up. My heart didn't race, but my hand froze above the ledger. I didn't need to ask who. I knew. I walked into the dining area, past the familiar oak tables. Afternoon light streamed through the glass, landing on three faces I had once tried hard to forget. My father, Daryl, sat in the middle, hair white and wispy, his frame sunken, his once intimidating presence now just a set of deep wrinkles and time-worn lines. My mother, Lorraine, forced a weak smile, eyes glistening. Mason sat on the right, once confident, now looking tired and pale. A young woman I didn't recognize sat tucked behind Mason, watching quietly. No one spoke first. I broke the silence. It's been a while. My mother blinked rapidly, lips trembling. We've been looking for you. Everyone's been worried. Your father, he has heart issues, no insurance. Mason, well, you know. I pulled out a chair, resting my hands on the table. Cut to it. You're here for money. Just say it. My father exhaled, trying to sit straighter. It's not what you think. We're family. When one's in trouble, the others help. You've done well, haven't you? We heard this place is doing great. I didn't answer. My eyes locked onto Mason. You remember Colorado, don't you? I asked. He furrowed his brows, trying to stay calm. Josh, I swear, it was a joke. We meant to come back, but when we did, you were gone. I gave a dry laugh, eyes unblinking. I stood in 100-degree heat for 2 hours in the desert. No water, no wallet, no phone. I was 17, not a kid lost in a supermarket. My mother slowly placed her hands on the table, voice cracking. I'm sorry, I should have done something, but I was scared. Daryl told me. I raised a hand to stop her. You should have spoken up when he threw away my college acceptance letter. When Mason smashed my computer, you should have defended me. But you chose silence. No one replied. I stood up and walked into the small back office. On the desk was a white envelope I had prepared ever since reading the comment under the photo of Daryl in a wheelchair. If anyone knows Joshua, please let him know. I came back out, set the envelope on the table, and slid it toward my father. $72.50. That was the exact cost of a bus ticket in 2008 from Grand Junction back to the old town. The price I would have paid if I wanted to return to be the family's punching bag. Mason snatched the envelope, pulled out the check, and scoffed. You think this little stunt makes you clever? I looked him straight in the eye. I don't need to be clever. I just need everyone here to understand. I'm not that 17-year-old kid anymore. Daryl slammed his hand on the table, loud enough to make a few nearby customers turn their heads. You think you got where you are by yourself? You think you just woke up smart? Who taught you how to survive, huh? I lowered my voice, every word tight with control. No one taught me how to survive. I learned in spite of how all of you treated me. The woman with Mason, maybe his wife or girlfriend, spoke softly. We didn't know your past. I'm sorry. I nodded. You don't have to apologize. You weren't there that day. I turned to leave. Lorraine stood up. Josh, don't do this, no matter what. I'm still your mother. I looked back one last time. No. You were a witness, but you did nothing. There was nothing left to say. When they stood, I saw my father gripping the check, then throwing it to the floor just outside the diner. Mason glared at me like I was the one who tore the family apart, not the other way around. I waited until they reached their car. No goodbye, no send-off. When their old SUV turned out of the parking lot, I bent down, picked up the check, folded it, and slipped it into the drawer behind the counter. Not to use, but to remember. I was once worth nothing to them. Now, I'm strong enough to define my own value. They left on a mild afternoon, no promise to return, no backward glance. The old SUV crawled past the bend and disappeared behind autumn cellar maple trees. I stood there, feeling nothing. No triumph, no bitterness, just the turn of a page. One that didn't need a bookmark. After that day, no more texts came through. No anonymous accounts asking, is Joshua okay on social media? My mother stopped posting emotional quotes. Mason stopped tagging friends in missing family posts. The silence lingered, and I let it. Instead of looking back, I focused on what was right in front of me. A small wooden house on the outskirts of Grand Junction, with a backyard big enough for 2 kids to play tag, and a tomato patch I was still trying to coax into bearing anything edible. Kendra worked at the town clinic 3 days a week. The rest of the time, she taught Ellie how to read and helped Marcus learn the difference between a fire truck and a police car. Not easy, considering he always wore sunglasses and declared himself sheriff of the house. I rotated between managing all 3 branches of the nest. Once a week, I still worked the kitchen at the original Fruto location, the same place I walked into after being left behind at that gas station. The regulars had become friends. They called me by my real name. No jokes, no mistakes. Every Saturday morning, I made a baked egg pie that Ellie nicknamed Memory Pie. I never asked why. Maybe she sensed truths she didn't need words for yet. I no longer dreamed about the Colorado road trip. The old nightmares, standing alone in the heat waiting for a car that never came back, had been replaced by lighter dreams. I saw myself pushing Marcus on a swing, Kendra falling asleep on the couch mid-chapter, Ellie laughing as I made animal noises in the kitchen. Once, I stumbled upon an old thread on a local forum, one where Lorraine had once begged for help. It had long faded into oblivion, no new comments. I reread every word, emotionless. There was nothing left that could drag me back into that mess. Kendra once asked me one evening as we sorted through family photos, "Do you think if they had ever truly apologized, things would have been different?" I rested my hand on a picture of Marcus wearing a pot as a space helmet, then nodded. "Maybe, but they didn't. They don't know how to apologize. All they know is how to demand what they think they're owed." She leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice barely a breath. "And you built a whole life to prove you never owed them anything." Exactly. I never got revenge. I didn't need to. Because every morning I wake up in this house, to the sound of tiny feet racing down the hallway and the scent of coffee already brewed, is a quiet but undeniable victory. I don't need to shout to prove anything, I just need to live. Fully, peacefully, and without bowing to anyone. Each month, I still send a donation to the shelter where Rosie once gave me my first meal when the world shut me out. I don't sign my real name, just write, "From someone who got a second start." I still keep the envelope with the $72.50 check in my office drawer. Sometimes I open it, not out of spite, but to remember. I once had nothing. And now, I haven't just survived. I've built a small empire with the very hands they once called useless. One late afternoon, as snow began to fall, Ellie asked me, "Dad, do you have grandparents?" I sat beside her, gently brushing her hair, and answered truthfully, "I used to, but they're not like the grandparents in your stories." She nodded. "Then I only need Grandma Kendra." I smiled and kissed her forehead. "That's more than enough." We sat together, watching the yard turn white, warm light spilling through the curtains. I held my wife's hand, glanced at our 2 kids curled up in their blankets, and quietly thought, no declarations, no vengeance. Living well, living kindly. That's the most powerful answer for anyone who ever doubted we'd go anywhere. And I, the boy once left behind at a deserted rest stop, didn't just keep walking. I found the home I never dared to dream of. Joshua's story is proof that a painful past does not define a person's future. From a boy abandoned by his family, he rose through sheer will, hard work, and unshakable self-respect. No grand act of revenge was needed. His fulfilled life, his loving family, and his self-made career were answer enough. Joshua didn't just survive, he truly lived, reclaiming his worth in a journey no one can ever take from him. What do you think about Joshua's journey? Was his silence the most powerful response? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow our channel for more meaningful stories about life and family.